this is called crochet tapestry or tapestry crochet,
Right.
which maybe people are thinking, I didn't even know people crocheted anymore.
Well, you know, this is a type of crochet that really looks like it's woven, and that's why it's probably called tapestry crochet. And there's so many wonderful things you can make with it, functional bags or flat tapestries. You don't need a lot of supplies. I started off designing pieces on regular graph paper, but then eventually I noticed that the stitches actually skew to one angle or the other.
Oh.
And you can use motifs from different things like cross stitch if you'd like to translate them into tapestry crochet. And over the years, maybe because of my art background, I've always wanted to create my own original designs. And so I came up with a number of different ways of doing that, from basic doodling on paper to make little hearts, or projecting more complicated faces onto the
Like
papers.
we'll look at in a minute. This is an example of what we're talking about, and you might mention to just someone like myself that didn't really know what we were looking for, this all looks the same to me, but it's a very distinct difference, and you might explain what this is.
I actually made this bag before I designed my own graph paper using the square graph paper, but I started to notice that the stitches really aren't on top of each other. The stitches kind of curve to the side. This one I designed with the graph paper. This leg here, these stitches are one on top of each other, and they just naturally go to the right because I'm a right-handed crocheter. If I were left-handed, it would go to the left. But then this leg here, I moved every row over one to create that angle. And in fact, there are certain motifs that work really well with tapestry crochet, and that's why a lot of my pieces have zigzags or triangles. Circles are much more difficult to crochet.
The heart design, is
the heart design works really well. It's a little tough on the top part because you have the two round areas, but the bottom part being essentially a triangle, it works out really well.
So this is what we're seeing, a difference in once you design graph paper that was specifically designed for this type of project. You might explain, this is a great example of how the pattern could be distorted.
Right. This star I copied from a cross-stitch pattern. This star I designed on the tapestry crochet graph paper, and both of them look
star.
Right, it's the same star. They'll have a little different look, but I think the angles are a little bit more effective here. Now this is when you crochet in rounds, around and around. Down here, this is the way I crochet flat. I switch hands at the end of every row so that I always have the front stitch on the front and the back on the back. And with this type of crocheting, every other row is angled, so you have one row, all the stitches leaning to the right or left, and the other just the opposite. So I had to design separate graph papers for right-handed crocheters, left-handed crocheters, and then also papers for doing flat, because it's the flat tapestry where I really want an exact image, because I'm doing portraits and I don't want the faces to be real distorted.
Or stretched. Now what about this example?
Okay, well, what this shows is normally when you crochet flat, you turn the piece at the end of the row and go back, and what happens is you get ridges, and also it places the stitches slightly off. By going back and forth and switching hands, or what some people have done in my classes is they will turn their piece, but then they insert the hook from the back.
One time it's from the front.
Right, and one time from the back. I prefer to switch hands because I'm usually doing complicated pieces like portraits, and it's easier for me to have the piece always facing front.
So this is what we're talking about, graph paper that is designed for these projects for the left-handed and the right-handed. You can see that the stitches are slightly
These
turned.
stitches are actually one over another, but they skew to either the right or the left. Now, these are just 3 of my graph papers that are in my More Tapestry Crochet book. Depending how many threads you're carrying, with tapestry crochet you work with 2 or more threads at the same time, and you carry one or more and work the other, and then switch as you need them. If you carry a lot of threads, your stitch will be higher. If you carry a few, it'll be lower, and it also depends on the tension, how tight you crochet. You can make, very loose items by having a large hook and not much tension, or very tight items. Depends what you're looking for, and that will affect the tension. And then, so what I suggest people do, if they want to design something, make a little sample and then measure it. Find out the gauge by measuring how many rows per inch, how many stitches per inch, and then choose one of the graph papers that's appropriate and then design on that paper. And if they're doing a very large piece, they can cut the papers and tape them together to make larger pieces. And there are a number of ways that I design. The easiest is just to, after I realize which graph paper I want to use, I get the paper and I just start doodling with a pencil. If I have a multicolored motif, I'll use colored pencils.
To indicate which,
which color goes where. But those colored pencils are more difficult to erase, so often I'll start with a regular pencil.
Lead pencil.
And then I'll choose which one to use. And let's say I'm choosing this one. I draw a line to figure out how many stitches wide this motif is. Well,
or is it an inch? Oh, it looks like
no,
close
what it
to an inch.
is every project has either circumference or width of so many stitches. So if you want to put the hearts, actually I should put a line here, otherwise it'll all be connected. If I want to put hearts next to one another with one in between, then I'd count this and make sure that my project is a multiple of whatever this number is.
And another way you do it that I think is quite interesting, and we have an example of it, this is a flat piece.
Right.
And you do this by just actually laying your hands on and drawing around them.
You can trace. I put my hand here and traced. This is my husband's hand. And
it has the heart motif.
Right, it has the heart motif. In fact, what I've noticed is I really like that heart motif. And I've done a number of projects with hearts, but the hearts are never the same. Even the people, I've done a lot of pieces with people. They're always slightly different. And that's one thing you can do, too, for design. You can find inspiration in other cultures, looking at baskets or tiles or whatever, and find things you like, and then keep reinterpreting them.
This is what this piece would look like when it's done with the two hands in the heart.
This is the finished piece, and this is also in my more Tapestry Crochet book.
And certainly we're glad that there's people like you who like to do the designing, because the rest of us would just as soon do the pretty part. And this is interesting, the way that you have designed this piece, and we might first take a look at this, this very large wall hanging. And you said this took a couple of years to do, so it's not a beginning piece, certainly.
It took a while, and I was still experimenting. I did this before I designed the Tapestry Crochet paper. I projected an image from a book with an opaque projector onto a number of pieces of the square graph paper taped together. But I hadn't taken into consideration the stitch placement. So if you look in some areas, it's very stepped looking. But the wonderful thing about the Tapestry Crochet paper, it does take into consideration the stitch placement. So then I took this image and put the Tapestry Crochet paper over it on a light table and traced it. And that gave me a much more realistic. The curves look better, the proportions are better. And then I transferred it to the square graph paper, because I find it's very difficult to crochet from the Tapestry Crochet paper, because when you look at one of the stitches, you don't know if it's over a stitch to the right or to the left.
And I think you can see the detail.
Yes, the curves are much better. Now, in addition to the tracing, I also use words often. And
I noticed this scarf has
this has, I call it my affirmation scarf.
Yes.
It was in Crochet Fantasy. In fact, I've had a number of pieces published in magazines to help get the word out about tapestry crochet, because I think people would enjoy doing it.
And you have several other things that also exemplify the heart motif.
Right. I chose just a few to show how I've used the heart in a number of different ways and over the years. And this was crocheted more loosely, so it has a wonderful drape to it. And let's see, I mentioned the letters. And I guess the next thing would be practice and start looking. Once you're looking for patterns, your eye tends to seek out different things than maybe most people. But there are many woven either cloth or basket pieces that have wonderful patterns that translate
We just need to start looking
right,
for
you have
those
to start
things, don't
looking
we?
for them. Go to the natural history museums, the anthropology museums, and just start looking.